Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Discovery. Dr. Derek Farmer had always prided himself on his precision. 22 years of marriage, 15 years as a cardiac surgeon at Portland General Hospital, and a reputation that commanded respect from colleagues and fear from residents. His life was ordered, methodical, and predictable, exactly how he liked it. That Saturday afternoon changed everything. Dad, help! The panic in 13-year-old Tommy's voice cut through the autumn air as Derek worked in his garage. He found his son clutching his left arm, blood seeping through his fingers from a gash he'd gotten falling off his bike into the neighbor's construction debris. "Let me see," Derek said, his medical training kicking in automatically. "I already looked at it," came Naomi's voice from behind them. His wife emerged from the house, her nurse's bag in hand. "It's not that deep. Just needs cleaning and bandaging." Derek watched as Naomi, his wife of 22 years, mother of his child, and head nurse in the hospital's emergency department, efficiently cleaned the wound. Her movements were practiced, confident. She'd been treating cuts and scrapes since before they'd met in medical school. "There," she said, securing the bandage with medical tape. "Good as new. No stitches needed." Derek nodded, trusting her judgment. Naomi had seen thousands of wounds. If she said it was fine, it was fine. But 3 hours later, when Derek checked on Tommy before dinner, the white bandage was completely soaked through with blood. "Naomi," he called, but she was on the phone in their bedroom, her voice low and intimate in a way that made something cold settle in his stomach. He'd been hearing that tone more frequently lately, always when she thought he wasn't listening. Derek carefully unwrapped the bandage himself. The cut was indeed deep, deeper than Naomi had indicated, but that wasn't what made his blood freeze. Tucked inside the bandage, deliberately placed against the wound, was a small piece of rusted metal. Surgical steel, to be precise, deliberately inserted to cause infection. His hands shook as he recognized the specific alloy. This wasn't random debris. This was from a surgical instrument, filed down and aged with chemicals. Someone with medical knowledge had planted this. Derek grabbed his son and ran outside when he realized it was attempted murder. The cold October air hit his face as the pieces fell into place. Naomi's late nights at the hospital, her sudden interest in life insurance policies, the way she'd insisted on treating Tommy's wound alone, the metal fragment that would have caused a severe infection, possibly sepsis, in a child. His wife was trying to kill their son, and Derek was going to find out why. Chapter 2. The Investigation. Derek spent the next week in careful observation mode, his surgical training serving him well in the art of patient watching. He said nothing to Naomi about the metal fragment, instead storing it in a secure container in his office safe. To anyone observing, he appeared to be the same devoted husband and father he'd always been. But inside, Derek Farmer was conducting surgery on his own life, dissecting each conversation, each glance, each supposedly innocent moment with the precision of a scalpel. The first revelation came Tuesday morning. While reviewing surgical schedules, Derek noticed something odd in the hospital's employee access logs, information he had administrative access to as head of cardiac surgery. Naomi's key card had been used to enter the medical supply room at 2:47 a.m. 3 weeks ago. The same night, she'd claimed to be working a double shift in the ER. Derek cross-referenced the ER schedules. Naomi hadn't been scheduled that night. The second revelation came Wednesday evening. While Naomi showered, Derek scrolled through her phone, something he'd never done in 22 years of marriage. What he found made his hands clench into fists. Messages with someone named C, dating back 8 months. "Can't wait to be free of him. Tommy too. The insurance money will set us up for life. Are you sure about the kid? That's crossing a line, Naomi. He's not even yours, remember? Derek doesn't know. Never has." Derek's world tilted. Tommy wasn't his son. The metal fragment should work. Slow infection looks accidental. No one will question a simple cut gone wrong. What about Derek? Car accident. Next month. I got a plan. Derek screenshotted everything before deleting the messages from a recent activity. Naomi emerged from the bathroom, toweling her dark hair, and smiled at him. The same warm smile she'd given him for over 2 decades. "How was your day, honey?" "Fine," Derek replied, his voice steady. Inside, he was already planning. The third revelation came Friday afternoon when Derek followed C from the hospital parking lot. Chad DeLeon, the new anesthesiologist who joined their team 6 months ago. Young, handsome, and according to hospital gossip, single. Derek watched from his car as Chad entered a downtown apartment building. A little research revealed Chad had signed the lease 9 months ago, right around the time he and Naomi had started their affair. Derek sat in his car for an hour, watching the building, making mental notes. Chad drove a red BMW, license plate memorized. Second-floor apartment, corner unit. Large windows facing the street. That evening, Derek tucked Tommy into bed, looking at the boy, Naomi's son, but not his, with a mixture of love and rage. Tommy had no idea he was living with a woman who tried to kill him, who was planning to kill the only father he'd ever known. "Dad," Tommy's voice was sleepy. "Thanks for taking care of my arm. Mom's great with the little stuff, but you always know what to do when it's really bad." Derek's throat tightened. "I'll always take care of you, son. Always." Because Tommy might not be his biological child, but Derek had raised him, loved him, been there for every scraped knee and bad dream. That made Tommy his in every way that mattered. And Derek Farmer protected what was his. Chapter 3, The Plan. Derek spent his weekend researching. Not medical journals this time, but legal precedents, insurance policies, and most importantly, Chad DeLeon's background. What he discovered was illuminating. Chad had left his previous position at Seattle General under mysterious circumstances. No formal complaints, but Derek's contacts in the medical community painted a picture of a man who'd had affairs with multiple colleagues' wives. A pattern of behavior that had never quite crossed into actionable territory, but had made him unwelcome. More interesting was Chad's financial situation. Despite his substantial anesthesiologist salary, he was drowning in debt. Gambling addiction, according to one colleague Derek had called. Chad needed money badly. The life insurance policies Naomi had been reviewing made sense now. Derek's policy was worth $3 million. Tommy's was worth $1 million, a policy Naomi had insisted on when he was born, claiming it was responsible parenting. Derek realized he was looking at a carefully orchestrated plan that had been months in the making. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed Derek was the same trusting, methodical man who'd never questioned his wife's late nights or mysterious phone calls. Derek began his own plan that Monday morning. First, he quietly transferred most of their liquid assets to accounts Naomi couldn't access. Legal, since he'd set up all their finances, but it would leave her cash poor if she tried to run. Second, he scheduled a meeting with his attorney, Josh Howard, an old friend from medical school who'd gone into law instead of medicine. Josh was successful, discreet, and most importantly, ruthless when his clients needed protection. "I need you to prepare divorce papers," Derek told Josh in his downtown office. "Full custody of Tommy, citing abandonment and adultery. I'll have evidence." "This is sudden, Derek. You and Naomi always seemed. She's been having an affair. Worse than that." Derek handed Josh printed copies of the text messages. "She tried to hurt Tommy, and she's planning to kill me for the insurance money." Josh's eyebrows rose as he read. "Derek, have you contacted the police?" "Not yet. I want everything in place first. When I move, I want it to be decisive." Derek's third step was the most dangerous. He needed to gather more evidence of Naomi and Chad's plan. But more than that, he needed to understand exactly how they planned to kill him so he could turn it against them. That evening, Derek announced he needed to work late at the hospital. Instead, he parked across from Chad's apartment building and waited. At 8:30 p.m., Naomi's car pulled up. Derek watched his wife disappear into the building, then positioned himself where he could see into Chad's apartment. What he witnessed over the next hour confirmed everything. Naomi and Chad, intimate in ways that made Derek's jaw clench. But it was the conversation he could partially read through their lips that provided the final pieces. They were accelerating their timeline. The accident was planned for this weekend. Derek drove home, his mind racing. Naomi was already back, claiming she'd been called in for an emergency surgery that had been canceled. "How was your evening, honey?" she asked, kissing his cheek. "Quiet," Derek said. "Just caught up on some reading." But as Naomi headed upstairs, Derek made a phone call to Josh Howard. "It's happening this weekend," he said quietly. "I need everything ready by Friday." "Derek, maybe we should involve the police now." "No, I'm going to handle this my way." Because Derek Farmer had spent 15 years in surgery, making split-second decisions that meant life or death. He learned that sometimes to save a patient, you had to cut out the diseased tissue completely. And his life had definitely been infected. Chapter 4, The Setup. Derek's plan began with precision Thursday morning. He called in sick for the first time in 3 years, claiming a stomach bug. Naomi left for her shift at the hospital with a concerned kiss and promises to bring him soup later. The moment her car disappeared around the corner, Derek was in motion. His first stop was Chad's apartment building. Derek had learned that Chad worked the afternoon shift this week, leaving his apartment empty until noon. Building security was minimal, a simple key card system that Derek bypassed by following a delivery truck through the service entrance. Chad's apartment was exactly what Derek had expected. Expensive furniture purchased on credit, empty whiskey bottles in the trash, and most tellingly, a stack of gambling debts totaling over $200,000 hidden in a bedroom drawer. Derek photographed everything, but his real target was Chad's computer. Medical professionals were notoriously poor with cybersecurity, and Chad was no exception. His password was BMW 2024, his car, and the year he wanted to pay it off. The laptop's browser history revealed online research into untraceable poisons, specifically digitalis, a heart medication that was nearly impossible to detect post-mortem if administered correctly. Chad had been researching dosages and delivery methods. More damning were the saved documents. Chad had drafted detailed plans for Derek's accidental death during a weekend hiking trip he and Naomi had been encouraging Derek to take. A slip on a rocky trail, a fall into the river, and Derek's body would be found days later with drowning as the cause of death. The digitalis would have stopped his heart during the fall, making rescue impossible even if someone had been there to help. Derek copied everything to a secure drive, then planted something of his own, a keystroke logger that would capture every future password and document. Chad would never know Derek had been there. His second stop was more personal. Derek drove to the storage facility where he kept his father's old hunting equipment. Dr. Samuel Farmer had been a country doctor in rural Oregon before Derek was born, a man who believed in being prepared for anything. Among his father's belongings, Derek found exactly what he needed: an untraceable hunting rifle and a set of night vision equipment that Samuel had used for predator control on their family ranch. Derek wasn't planning to kill anyone, yet, but he wanted options. His third and most important stop was a meeting with a private investigator named Perry Simons, recommended by Josh Howard. Perry was ex-military, specialized in domestic cases, and most importantly, asked no questions as long as the retainer was paid in cash. "I need complete surveillance on 2 people," Derek told Perry in the investigator's downtown office. "My wife and her lover. I need to know everywhere they go, everyone they meet, and every conversation they have for the next week." Perry studied Derek with calculating eyes. "This about the insurance money?" Derek's surprise must have shown on his face because Perry smiled grimly. "Your wife's been asking questions around town, trying to find someone who could make a car accident look convincing. Word gets around in my business. She approached someone, 3 someones, all of whom told her to get lost. But the 4th person might not be so ethical." Perry slid a file across his desk. "Guy named Vince Bowers. Works as a mechanic, but he's got a side business in automotive accidents. Your wife met with him Tuesday night." Derek opened the file. Photos of Naomi sitting across from a heavily tattooed man in a downtown bar. Their conversation looked intense, businesslike. "What did you hear?" "Nothing concrete yet, but Bowers specializes in brake line failures. Makes it look like mechanical failure instead of sabotage." Perry leaned back in his chair. "How far are you willing to go to protect yourself, Dr. Farmer?" Derek thought about Tommy's bandaged arm, about the metal fragment that could have killed his son, About 22 years of marriage built on lies. As far as necessary. Perry nodded. Then we understand each other. I'll have everything you need by Monday morning. Derek spent Thursday evening playing the devoted husband, bringing Naomi flowers and suggesting they plan a romantic weekend getaway. Just the two of them, since Tommy was invited to spend the weekend with his friend Luke Holder's family. That sounds wonderful, Naomi said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Maybe we could go hiking. You've been working so hard lately. Perfect, Derek agreed. I know just the place. But as Naomi made plans for what she thought would be Derek's final weekend, Derek was making plans of his own. By Friday morning, everything was in place. The divorce papers were filed but sealed. Perry Simons had teams watching both Naomi and Chad, and Derek had confirmed that Vince Bowers had indeed agreed to sabotage Derek's car. The trap was set. Derek just needed to make sure he wasn't the one who walked into it. Chapter 5. The Betrayal. Friday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth, making Derek's suggestion of a Saturday morning hike seem perfectly reasonable. Naomi agreed enthusiastically, even packing a special thermos of coffee to help wake you up on the trail, honey. Derek accepted the thermos with a loving smile, knowing it almost certainly contained the digitalist Chad had been researching. That night, while Naomi slept beside him, Derek reviewed Perry Simons' latest surveillance report. Chad had visited Vince Bowers' garage that afternoon, paying cash for what appeared to be automotive work. The brake lines on Derek's BMW had been professionally compromised. They would fail after approximately 10 miles of mountain driving, right around the same time the digitalist would be taking effect. Tommy left early Saturday morning for his weekend with the Holder family, giving Derek a fierce hug goodbye. Have fun on your hike, Dad. Don't let Mom pick all the easy trails. Derek held his son a moment longer than usual. I love you, Tommy. Remember that, no matter what happens. At 7 a.m., Derek and Naomi loaded their hiking gear into the BMW. Derek had switched the coffee thermoses while Naomi showered, so she would be drinking her own poison. He'd also made one small modification to their plans. I thought we'd try the Cascade Trail today, Derek said as they drove toward the mountains. It's more challenging, but the views are incredible. Whatever you think is best, Naomi replied, her hand resting on his arm with what might have looked like affection to an outside observer. The Cascade Trail was indeed more challenging. It was also 30 miles from where Derek had told Chad and Vince Bowers they would be hiking. Derek had spent years learning these mountains with his father, and he knew every trail, every cliff, and most importantly, every place where cell phone service disappeared completely. 10 miles into their drive, Derek felt the first soft give in the brake pedal. Right on schedule. The coffee smells great, he said, reaching for Naomi's thermos. Mind if I have a sip? Oh, that's my special blend, Naomi said quickly. I made yours with extra caffeine, the way you like it. Derek pretended to drink from his own thermos, while Naomi sipped steadily from hers. Within minutes, her face began to flush as the digitalis entered her system. Feeling okay? Derek asked with genuine concern. You look a little pale. Just tired. Maybe we should turn back. We're almost there, Derek said, downshifting to use the engine for braking as they climbed higher into the mountains. Besides, I think there's something wrong with the brakes. We should get to the trailhead where I can take a look. Naomi's eyes widened as she realized what he was saying. Her hand went to her chest as her heart began to race from the poison she'd intended for him. Derek, I think something's wrong. I feel like your heart is racing, irregular rhythm, shortness of breath. Derek's voice remained perfectly calm as he navigated the mountain road using engine compression and the emergency brake. Those are classic symptoms of digitalis poisoning. The color drained from Naomi's face. How do you? The same way I knew about the metal fragment you put in Tommy's bandage. The same way I knew about Chad DeLeon. The same way I knew about your plan to kill me for the insurance money. Derek pulled into the empty trailhead parking lot, the BMW coming to a safe stop despite the sabotage brake lines. Naomi fumbled for her phone, but Derek had already confirmed there was no signal at this elevation. The coffee was meant for me, wasn't it? Just like the accidental brake failure. You and Chad thought you had it all figured out. Derek turned to face his wife of 22 years. But you made one mistake. Derek, please. Let me explain. You try to hurt Tommy. Derek's voice was arctic. That child never did anything to deserve a mother who would poison him for money. And when that failed, you decided to kill me too. Naomi was breathing heavily now, the digitalis affecting her cardiovascular system exactly as intended. The hospital. We need to get to the hospital. Do we? Derek checked his watch. According to Chad's research, which I found very educational, we have about 30 minutes before the dosage becomes lethal. Plenty of time to have a conversation. Derek reached into his hiking pack and pulled out printed copies of every text message, every photo, every piece of evidence he'd gathered over the past week. I know about the gambling debts. I know Chad's been using you to pay them off. I know Tommy isn't my biological son, though I'm curious. Who is his real father? Naomi's eyes filled with tears, though Derek couldn't tell if it was from emotion or the drugs affecting her system. Derek, I was young. I made mistakes. Mistakes. Derek's composure finally cracked. Try to murder a 13-year-old boy isn't a mistake, Naomi. It's evil. The mountain silence stretched between them as Naomi's breathing became more labored. Here's what's going to happen, Derek said finally. I'm going to drive back down this mountain. When I get to a place with cell phone service, I'm going to call 911 and report a terrible accident. My wife drank coffee that was meant for me, coffee that had been poisoned by her lover as part of a murder plot. You can't. I'm dying. Yes, you are. The same way you planned for me to die. The only difference is that I have an antidote in my pack. Derek held up a small vial. Digoxin Immune Fab. It'll neutralize the digitalis completely. Hope flared in Naomi's eyes. But I'm not going to give it to you, because you tried to kill my son, and that is unforgivable. Derek started the engine, the emergency brake still functional despite Vince Bauer's sabotage work. Please, Naomi whispered. I'm sorry. I'll confess everything. I'll leave Chad. We can start over. Derek looked at the woman he'd loved for over 2 decades, the mother of the child he'd raised as his own, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. No, he said simply. We can't. Chapter 6, The Cleanup. Derek drove down the mountain at exactly the speed limit, using the emergency brake and engine compression to maintain control of the BMW. In the passenger seat, Naomi slipped in and out of consciousness as the digitalis continued its work. At exactly 11:47 a.m., Derek reached the first area with reliable cell phone coverage. He pulled over, checked Naomi's pulse, weak and irregular, exactly as expected, and called 911. This is Dr. Derek Farmer. I need emergency assistance at mile marker 23 on Highway 26 near Cascade Trailhead. My wife has been poisoned and I need immediate medical evacuation. The 911 dispatcher's voice was calm and professional. Dr. Farmer, can you describe her symptoms? Classic digitalis poisoning. Irregular heartbeat, nausea, confusion. She's unconscious now. I believe someone put it in her coffee this morning. Sir, did you say someone put poison in her coffee? Yes. My wife has been having an affair with Dr. Chad De Leon, an anesthesiologist at Portland General Hospital. Based on evidence I've uncovered, they were planning to kill me today for life insurance money. It appears Dr. De Leon gave her the poisoned coffee, not realizing she would drink it herself. Derek provided the dispatcher with exact coordinates, medical details, and a careful recounting of the morning's events. All perfectly truthful, merely omitting certain key details about thermos switching and Derek's own prior knowledge. The life flight helicopter arrived within 20 minutes. Derek watched with professional detachment as the paramedics worked to stabilize Naomi, administering the same antidote he'd carried in his pack, but chosen not to use. Is she going to make it? Derek asked the flight medic, playing the concerned husband perfectly. We caught it in time, but it's going to be close. The digitalis has caused significant cardiac arrhythmia. Derek rode in the helicopter, holding Naomi's hand as she drifted between consciousness and cardiac distress. During her few lucid moments, she looked at him with something between hatred and desperate hope. Please, she whispered during one brief awakening. Don't let me die. I'm doing everything I can, Derek replied, his voice carrying just the right note of loving concern for the benefit of the medical team. But he made no moves to improve her treatment, offered no additional medical insights that might help, and said nothing about the specific antidote dosages he knew would be most effective. By the time they reached Portland General Hospital, Naomi was in full cardiac arrest. Derek watched from a hallway as his colleagues in the emergency department worked frantically to save his wife's life. Dr. Trevor Barker, the head of cardiology, led the resuscitation effort while Derek provided the attending team with background information. "She'd been acting strangely lately," Derek told them. "Secretive. I found out this week she was having an affair with Chad DeLeon from anesthesiology." The revelation sent murmurs through the medical team. Workplace affairs were common enough, but attempted murder was something else entirely. "Dr. Farmer," came a voice behind him. Detective Andrew Crawford from Portland Police had arrived with remarkable speed. "I need to ask you some questions about this morning." Derek spent the next hour providing a detailed statement. He described discovering his wife's affair, finding evidence of a murder plot, and realizing too late that Naomi had been given poisoned coffee intended for him. "Where is Dr. DeLeon now?" Detective Crawford asked. "I assume he's at work. His shift started at noon." Crawford made a phone call. 20 minutes later, Chad DeLeon was in custody, found in the hospital parking lot attempting to flee in his red BMW. When police searched his vehicle, they found a receipt from Vince Bauer's garage, several vials of Digitalis stolen from the hospital pharmacy, and detailed notes about Derek and Naomi's hiking plans. Derek felt a cold satisfaction watching through the emergency department windows as Chad was led away in handcuffs. The man looked confused, panicked, and completely unprepared for the trap he'd walked into. At 4:17 p.m., Dr. Trevor Barker emerged from the trauma bay with the expression Derek had seen thousands of times, the look of a physician who'd lost a patient despite their best efforts. "Derek, I'm sorry. We couldn't get her rhythm back. The Digitalis caused too much damage to her cardiac conduction system." Derek nodded, his face a mask of controlled grief. "She was a good nurse. She didn't deserve this." It was even true in a way. The woman he'd married 22 years ago had been good. But that woman had died months ago, replaced by someone willing to murder a child for money. Detective Crawford approached with careful sympathy. "Dr. Farmer, I know this is difficult, but we need to discuss the investigation. Dr. DeLeon is claiming this was all your wife's idea, that she manipulated him into helping." "That's not true," Derek said firmly. "Chad is the one with gambling debts. He needed money desperately. Naomi was naive, vulnerable after years of feeling neglected by my work schedule. He used her." Derek's statement was carefully crafted to paint Chad as the mastermind and Naomi as a victim. It was also completely unprovable either way, since the only other person who knew the truth was dead. As the evening wore on, Derek played the grieving widower perfectly. Colleagues offered condolences. Tommy was brought home from his weekend trip, confused and devastated by his mother's sudden death. Derek held his son while the boy cried, promising him they would get through this together. "I don't understand," Tommy sobbed. "Why would anyone want to hurt Mom?" "Some people do terrible things when they're desperate," Derek said softly. "But Mom loved you very much. Never doubt that." It was even true. Whatever else Naomi had become, Derek believed she had loved Tommy in her own way. She just loved money more. Chapter 7. The Trial. 3 months later, Derek sat in the Portland County Courthouse watching Chad DeLeon's murder trial reach its conclusion. The prosecution had built a compelling case. A gambling-addicted anesthesiologist who'd seduced a colleague's wife and manipulated her into a murder plot for insurance money. Chad's defense attorney had tried to paint Naomi as the mastermind, but the evidence told a different story. Chad's browser history, his meeting with Vince Bowers, his attempts to flee, all pointed to a man who'd planned and executed a murder scheme. Derek testified as the grieving widower, describing how he'd discovered his wife's affair and the plot against his life. His testimony was flawless, emotional without being overdramatic, factual without revealing his own role in orchestrating Naomi's death. "Dr. DeLeon preyed on my wife's vulnerabilities," Derek told the jury. "She was lonely, feeling disconnected from our marriage because of my demanding work schedule. He convinced her that killing me was the solution to their financial problems. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts, the foreman announced. Murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted murder. Chad DeLeon received life in prison without possibility of parole. As the verdict was read, he looked directly at Derek with an expression of pure hatred, as if he somehow knew Derek had orchestrated his downfall. Derek met his gaze without flinching. Chad could suspect all he wanted. There was no evidence Derek had done anything other than discover his wife's betrayal and suffer the consequences. After the trial, Derek was approached by Josh Howard outside the courthouse. "It's over," Josh said. "Chad's appeals will fail." Vince Bowers took a plea deal and testified against him. "Everyone involved is either dead or in prison." "Good," Derek replied. "Tommy needs closure." "How is he handling everything?" Derek considered the question. Tommy had struggled with his mother's death and the revelations about her affair, but he was resilient. At 13, he was old enough to understand that adults sometimes made terrible choices, but young enough to heal from the trauma. "He's going to be fine. We both are." And it was true. Derek had emerged from the ordeal with everything he'd wanted. Chad and Naomi were gone, Tommy was safe, and Derek's reputation remained intact. The insurance money from Naomi's death had been paid without question. Murder victims' life insurance policies weren't voided when the victim was also a conspirator. More importantly, Derek had discovered something about himself during those dark months. He was capable of far more than he'd ever imagined when protecting what mattered to him. The mild-mannered surgeon who'd trusted his wife for 22 years had been replaced by someone harder, more calculating, and infinitely more dangerous. Derek returned to work at Portland General Hospital the following Monday. His colleagues treated him with respectful sympathy, praising his strength in the face of tragedy. Several offered to help with Tommy's care, creating a support network that would ensure the boy never felt abandoned. Dr. Farmer came a voice behind him as he reviewed surgical schedules in his office. Derek turned to find Dr. Marina Steele, the new head of emergency nursing who'd replaced Naomi. "Marina, how are you settling in?" "Very well, thank you. I wanted to discuss the new protocols for medical supply access. We need to tighten security after—" She gestured vaguely, referring to Chad's theft of digitalis from the pharmacy. "Of course. What do you recommend?" As Marina outlined her proposals, Derek found himself evaluating her with new eyes. She was competent, professional, and showed no signs of the vulnerability that had allowed Chad to manipulate Naomi. But Derek would never again assume that competence and professionalism meant trustworthiness. That evening, Derek picked up Tommy from soccer practice and took him to dinner at their favorite restaurant. A father-son tradition they'd maintained even during the darkest period of Naomi's betrayal. "Dad," Tommy said over his burger, "kids at school are still asking questions about Mom and Dr. DeLeon." "What kind of questions?" "Whether you knew, whether you suspected, whether you're angry." Derek considered his answer carefully. "I'm sad that your mother made the choices she did. I'm angry that Chad DeLeon took advantage of her. But mostly, I'm grateful that we discovered the truth before anyone else got hurt." "Do you think Mom really would have gone through with it? Killing you, I mean?" Derek looked at his son, not his biological child, but his son in every way that mattered, and chose honesty. "I think your mother was lost, Tommy. She'd made so many bad choices that she couldn't see a way back to being the person she used to be. That doesn't excuse what she planned to do, but it helps me understand how she got there." Tommy nodded, processing this with the seriousness of a boy who'd been forced to grow up too quickly. "I'm glad you're still here, Dad." "So am I, son. So am I." Chapter 8. New Beginnings. 1 year after Naomi's death, Derek had settled into a routine that felt both familiar and entirely new. His surgical practice continued to thrive, his reputation enhanced rather than damaged by his handling of the tragedy. Colleagues and patients alike saw him as a man who'd faced unimaginable betrayal with dignity and strength. Tommy, now 14, had adapted remarkably well. He'd grown 3 inches, made the varsity soccer team despite his age, and developed the kind of quiet confidence that reminded Derek of his own father. The boy knew the truth about his parentage now. Derek had told him on his 14th birthday, believing honesty was better than secrets. "You're my dad in every way that matters," Tommy had said simply. Biology doesn't change that. Derek's relationship with his son had actually strengthened through the ordeal. Without Naomi's hovering presence and complex family dynamics, Derek and Tommy had developed an easy companionship built on mutual respect and shared interests. The insurance settlements had left them financially secure beyond Derek's original expectations. Naomi's life insurance had paid out fully, Chad's failed murder plot having no bearing on her coverage. Additionally, Derek had pursued and won a substantial civil lawsuit against Chad's estate for attempted murder and emotional damages. But perhaps most satisfying was the fate of Vince Bowers, the mechanic who'd sabotaged Derek's brakes. His plea deal had included only 3 years in prison for conspiracy, but Derek had ensured his punishment extended far beyond the legal system. A few well-placed conversations with contacts in Portland's automotive industry had destroyed Vince's reputation and business. Suppliers refused to sell him parts. Customers canceled contracts. His garage had closed within 6 months of his release from prison, leaving him unemployed and unemployable in his chosen field. Derek had learned that revenge didn't always require dramatic confrontation. Sometimes the most effective punishment was simply allowing someone's own poor choices to destroy them while ensuring they had no way to rebuild. On a crisp October afternoon, exactly 1 year after Naomi's death, Derek received an unexpected visitor at his office. Detective Andrew Crawford knocked on his door with an expression Derek couldn't quite read. "Detective Crawford, this is unexpected. Dr. Farmer, I hope you have a few minutes. There are some things I'd like to discuss." Derek gestured to a chair, his pulse remaining steady despite the detective's serious tone. "Of course. How can I help you?" Crawford pulled out a file folder and opened it slowly. "I've been reviewing the case files from your wife's death, just tying up loose ends for the district attorney's office. I thought that was all settled with Chad's conviction." "It is. Chad DeLeon will die in prison, and he deserves to. But I've been a detective for 22 years, Dr. Farmer, and I've learned to notice patterns." Derek waited, saying nothing. "Your wife's death was very convenient for you. You emerged from a murder plot as the victim, inherited significant life insurance money, gained full custody of your son, and saw everyone who betrayed you either dead or imprisoned. I was lucky," Derek said simply. "Lucky that Naomi drank the poisoned coffee instead of me. Lucky that we discovered the truth before Chad's plan succeeded." Crawford studied Derek's face with the intensity of a man who'd interrogated thousands of suspects. "See, that's what bothers me. In my experience, luck rarely works out that perfectly." Derek met the detective's gaze without flinching. "Are you suggesting something, detective?" "I'm suggesting that you're a very intelligent man who was betrayed by people you trusted. I'm suggesting that a man in your position might decide to take matters into his own hands rather than rely on the justice system. And what would you do with such a suspicion?" Crawford closed the file folder and leaned back in his chair. "Nothing. Because even if I'm right, justice was served. Chad DeLeon got exactly what he deserved. Your wife paid the price for her choices, and you and your son are safe." The two men sat in silence for a long moment. "But I want you to know that I know," Crawford said finally. "Call it professional courtesy. One man who's seen too much evil to another." Derek nodded slowly. "I appreciate your professionalism, detective, and your discretion." Crawford stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Dr. Farmer, I don't blame you. A man has a right to protect his family. Sometimes the system fails, and a man has to rely on himself." "Sometimes," Derek agreed. After Crawford left, Derek sat alone in his office, considering the detective's words. The man was perceptive, but ultimately it didn't matter what he suspected. There was no evidence Derek had done anything other than survive a murder plot and protect his son. That evening, Derek attended Tommy's soccer game, cheering from the sidelines as his son scored the winning goal. Afterward, they went for ice cream and discussed Tommy's plans for high school, his interest in potentially following Derek into medicine, and his excitement about an upcoming camping trip with Derek's brother's family. As they drove home through the October evening, Derek reflected on how completely his life had changed in the past year. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed him had instead freed him from a marriage built on lies and revealed his own capacity for decisive action when necessary. He learned that he was capable of far more than he'd ever imagined. But more importantly, he learned the value of the relationships that truly mattered. Dad, Tommy's voice interrupted his thoughts. Yes, I know this has been a hard year. Losing Mom, the trial, everything. But I want you to know I'm proud of how you handled it all. You protected us. Derek smiled, reaching over to squeeze his son's shoulder. That's what fathers do, Tommy. We protect what matters most. Chapter 9. Resolution. 5 years later, Derek Farmer stood at the podium of Portland General Hospital's annual awards banquet, accepting recognition as the hospital's chief of surgery. At 45, he'd reached the pinnacle of his profession while maintaining the personal stability that had eluded him during his marriage to Naomi. Tommy, now 19 and a sophomore at Stanford University studying pre-med, sat at the head table beaming with pride. The gangly 13-year-old who'd cut his arm that fateful October day had grown into a confident young man with his father's intelligence and determination, but with a warmth and optimism that Derek envied. 5 years ago, Derek told the assembled crowd of medical professionals, I learned that leadership isn't about avoiding crises, but about how we respond when everything we thought we knew turns out to be wrong. Medicine teaches us that sometimes, to save a patient, we have to cut away diseased tissue completely. The same is true in life. The audience applauded, unaware of the deeper meaning behind Derek's words. They saw a man who'd overcome personal tragedy to achieve professional excellence. They had no idea they were looking at someone who'd orchestrated one of the most perfect revenge schemes in Portland's history. After the ceremony, Derek was approached by Dr. Marina Steele, now the hospital's chief of emergency medicine and Derek's closest professional colleague. Over the 5 years since Naomi's death, Marina had proven herself to be everything Naomi had pretended to be: competent, trustworthy, and genuinely caring about her patients and colleagues. Congratulations, Derek. Well deserved. Thank you. I couldn't have achieved this without the support of colleagues like you. Marina smiled, but Derek detected something else in her expression. Derek, there's something I've been wondering about for a while. About Naomi and everything that happened. Derek's attention sharpened, though his expression remained pleasantly neutral. What about it? I've reviewed the medical records from that day. The digitalis dosage Naomi received was precisely calculated to be lethal, but only after a specific time delay. It's the kind of precise calculation that would require extensive medical knowledge. Chad was an anesthesiologist. He would have had that knowledge. Yes, but Chad's medical school records show he was barely competent in pharmacology. His professors consistently noted his difficulty with dosage calculations. Marina paused, studying Derek's face. But you're a cardiac surgeon. Digitalis dosing is something you'd know intimately. Derek said nothing, waiting. I'm not asking you to confirm anything, Marina continued. I'm just saying that if someone I cared about was in danger, and if the system failed to protect them, I might be tempted to take matters into my own hands. That would be a serious accusation. It's not an accusation. It's an understanding. Marina's voice was quiet but firm. Naomi tried to kill Tommy. She tried to kill you. Whatever happened to her, she earned it. Derek looked at Marina, brilliant, ethical, and apparently more perceptive than he'd realized. After a moment, he made a decision. Hypothetically speaking, he said carefully, what would you do with such an understanding? Nothing, because justice was served. Tommy is safe, you're safe, and the people who threatened your family are gone. Marina paused. But I want you to know that if you ever need someone you can trust completely, someone who understands that sometimes good people have to make difficult choices, you have that. Derek felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The possibility of genuine partnership with someone who saw him clearly and accepted what she saw. I appreciate that, Marina. More than you know. Derek, Dad. Tommy's voice interrupted as he approached with 2 other young people. I want you to meet my girlfriend, Clara, and my roommate, Josh. Derek turned his attention to his son, who was introducing him to a young woman with kind eyes and an easy smile, and a serious young man who reminded Derek of himself at that age. "It's an honor to meet you, Dr. Farmer," Clara said. "Tommy talks about you constantly. All good things, I hope. He says you're the strongest person he knows, that you taught him that protecting the people you love is the most important thing in life." Derek glanced at Tommy, seeing the man his son was becoming. Strong, principled, and capable of making difficult decisions when necessary. The traits Derek had modeled for him through years of careful guidance. "Family is everything," Derek said simply. "Everything else is just details." Later that evening, Derek and Tommy stood on the balcony of Derek's downtown penthouse, looking out over the Portland skyline. The apartment was Derek's reward to himself after achieving his career goals, a symbol of how completely he'd rebuilt his life after Naomi's betrayal. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Tommy's voice was serious. "Always. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mom had made different choices? If she'd never met Chad, never planned what she planned?" Derek considered the question carefully. "I think your mother was unhappy for a long time, Tommy. She made choices that led her further and further away from the person she used to be. At some point, she crossed a line she couldn't come back from. Do you forgive her?" "I understand her. I pity her. But forgive?" Derek shook his head. "Some things are unforgivable. When someone threatens the people you love, when they're willing to hurt an innocent child for money, they've put themselves beyond forgiveness." Tommy nodded, accepting this. At 19, he was old enough to understand that the world contained genuine evil, and that sometimes good people had to respond to evil with decisive action. "I'm glad you protected us," Tommy said quietly. "Whatever it took, I'm glad you kept us safe." Derek put his arm around his son's shoulders, looking out at the city lights and thinking about the path that had brought them to this moment. Naomi's betrayal had nearly destroyed him, but had also revealed reserves of strength and cunning he'd never known he possessed. He'd learned that he was capable of perfect planning, flawless execution, and absolute ruthlessness when protecting what mattered most. More importantly, he learned that some people were worth protecting, and others were simply obstacles to be removed. Chad De Leon had died in prison 2 years earlier, stabbed by another inmate who'd learned about his crimes against children. Derek had felt nothing but satisfaction reading the news report. Vince Bowers had died in a drunk driving accident 6 months later, his life destroyed by his involvement in the murder plot and his inability to rebuild after prison. Naomi was gone, her memory preserved only in a few photographs Tommy kept in his room. Derek had emerged from the ordeal stronger, wealthier, and more dangerous than anyone suspected. He'd built a new life based on honesty with Tommy, excellence in his profession, and the knowledge that he could handle any threat that emerged. "Ready to head inside?" Derek asked as the evening air grew cool. "In a minute." Tommy looked thoughtful. "Dad, I've been thinking about my future, about what kind of man I want to be. And I want to be like you. Strong enough to protect the people I love. Smart enough to see threats before they become dangerous. And decisive enough to act when action is necessary." Derek smiled, feeling a deep satisfaction at seeing his values successfully passed to the next generation. "That's all any father can ask for," he said. "To know his son will be capable of standing on his own and protecting what matters." As they headed inside, Derek reflected on the perfect justice of his situation. He'd lost a wife who'd betrayed him and gained a deeper relationship with his son. He'd eliminated enemies who'd threatened his family and advanced in his career. He'd learned exactly what he was capable of and found peace with that knowledge. Most importantly, he discovered that sometimes the best revenge wasn't dramatic confrontation or elaborate schemes. Sometimes it was simply outliving your enemies, protecting what mattered, and building something better on the ruins of what they tried to destroy. Derek Farmer had become exactly the man he'd needed to be, and he'd never felt more at peace with himself or more confident in his ability to handle whatever challenges the future might bring. The surgeon had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes, to save the patient, you had to cut out the disease completely. And Derek had developed very steady hands for that kind of precise, necessary work. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.